Now, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. So let me explain. First off, it's free. I'm not joking, you guys. The Anchor app, it is free to use. Second, there's creation tools that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Now that's awesome, isn't it? Third, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere, you guys, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and so many more platforms. Fourth, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Now, is that awesome, you guys, or what? That's just terrific. And finally, it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So I have another podcast with Anchor, and I'm just loving Anchor so much. I love it. It's so very easy to use, guys. So why don't you download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. What's up, you guys? And welcome to the official podcast of Damian Talks Education. So listen up. I am here to talk about all things education on my podcast. So get prepared for some realness and honesty of education as I walk you down through various of topics that's happening in the education world with some amazing guests, to sharing stories relating to education and so much more, because I got you covered with education. So join me on this journey of education with me. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Damian Talks Education. And happy Friday to all of my DTE fam out there, you guys. We have made it through another week. Yes, we have, you guys. Yes, we have. So welcome to my show. Now, today's episode is a very important one to have, and especially all over across the world, and especially into our schools, especially which is about race and racism. How do we have the talk with our elementary students? How do we have the talk with our middle school students? How do we have the talk with our high school students? How do we have the talk with adults who don't, who aren't? It's a lot. It's a lot. And we are going to dive into that today, you guys. From featuring stories of resistance to making sure that our kids see themselves represented in the classroom, a few things to keep in mind when teaching about American history in our schools. Now, teaching students U.S. history authentically requires many of you guys educators to dwell into race and racism, and also invite complex and hidden narratives into the conversation, and also give our students the tools to navigate and also make sense of the truths that are difficult to have to reconcile with the message of freedom and also democratic. So yes, now here is what I need to tell you all. What does it mean to be living on land taken from, and I can never say this word correctly, from indigenous people? And how can a nation recognize that many of its intuitions were built and made possible by the labor of enslaved people? And this was from the article that I have found, you guys. And continuing with this, because conversations around these hard histories can be very challenging, and also educators need to know how to approach the subject in consider and also developmentally appropriate way. So yes. Take notes for me, that educators.
Now, as schools in the country become more diverse now more than ever, a growing number of educators are working very hard to expand K through 12 curriculum and also to include the narratives of people from a wider range of, racial, ethnic, religious, and, their cultural background. And greater inclusive in history also allows young people to see themselves, yes, in the story of our shared past, and they not only develop a deeper, knowledge of the subject, but they become more very active into, the study about knowing it more of the subject. So yes. All right, so here are four considerations for teaching and also engaging with the complex narratives surrounding American history. So, first up is feature stories of resistance and resilience. Yes. Now, historical narratives should strike a balance between examining racism and discrimination, but also highlighting the resistance of communities throughout our history. So they are instilling in hope for our young people, but are also correcting the narrative often cursive views of U.S. history that glosses over important figures of resistance like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, um, the disability rights activist Ed Roberts, and Quam Kerr, born Stokely Carmichael. And it's an effort that calls on educators to teach a more accurate history that commonly goes untold, and the role of grassroots activists and women, Nas portraits of leaders like Rosa Parks and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and racial and social justice battles that link the past to contemporary issues of equality. Yes, oh yes, oh yes. And get this here, I found out a writer who says this, Rand Miller, who is an after school program director, says it's imperative that teachers not reinforce a milquetoast version of Black history, like a different kind of word, that is anti-Black because of its erasure of painful truths. And as a student, he learned about Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm gonna add that doctor in there. Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. And he heard very little of, Malcolm X, of course, the FBI's campaign against civil rights leaders and the Rainbow Coalition put together by the Black Panther Party, Fred Hampton's assassinations. And he also learned about the struggles of his enslaved ancestors, but not about Gabrielle Prosser's Denmark VC or Nat Turner. All right, so let's move on to our next one, which is examine primary sources. Now, textbook tends to gloss over large swathes of history, right, without going into much depth or even more details of bringing the voices of those who lived through those times to the surface. Absolutely, absolutely. And it's up to you guys, educators, teachers, to bring those voices inside of your own classroom. Vivid primary source documents, exactly, that tells the story of the event using the words of the people who are described by the curriculum. Yes, yes, yes. And it's important, however, to make sure that these materials that you are using inside your own classroom, history teachers, and not just only history teachers, also math, science, English, incorporate race and racism inside your classroom, you guys, not just only the history teachers. I'm gonna just say that now. And I don't know, I'm probably wrong about this or not, but at least I'm sharing my opinion. You guys should also be, talking about this inside your classroom, inside your math classroom, your science classroom, English language art classroom, your STEM classrooms, your art, your PE, all everywhere around the school building, everywhere, you guys. Okay. That's just me. That's my take. But you don't have to listen. You do not have to listen to me on that. Okay. Are very developmental, appropriate for teachers, and they can, edit them, out so their students can understand and engage with the text. Absolutely. And also, a writer, he suggests that to give kids the opportunities to discuss and also process their own feelings that come up, as they are learning about these histories. Absolutely. And one way to do this is to check in with students vivid on anonymous Google survey. Yes, I don't know why I did it like that, but I wanted you guys to hear that out. Okay, so a teacher can then validate those emotions, and some people might feel angry about it or sad about it. But this giving students a chance, to process the emotions that come up is very essential for us, for the educators, to move forward as a country and also acknowledge racism. Absolutely. And this is from Adrian Sand, who is a K through 12 history and social studies coordinator for Cambridge Public Schools. Now, the effort to find and also work with primary documents presents a valuable opportunity to teach older students how to carefully vet resources, a foundational critical thinking skills that involves understanding the cultural context and values from which primary sources spring, and also determining the credibility of resources. Now, in a social studies class, for example, vetting resources is very important, not just because we want to ensure our students they are learning from accurate and variable documents, if they're up to date and are they correct and stuff. So it's important also because the ability to ask questions about sources, bias, and context are at the heart of social studies education and are very essential skills for thriving inside of our modern world as of today, 2021. Yeah. Up next, our third one, which is make sure our kids see themselves inside of our classroom. Now, books and curriculum should reflect the diversity, our world, and identify all of our students, all of our students, all of our students. I'm hoping you guys are hearing me on that inside the classroom. Now, in early grades, check in with families and caregivers to gain an understanding of students' backgrounds. And also make sure kids have the opportunity to not only learn, not just about their identities of students in the classroom, but also about diverse culture and backgrounds that are not reflected inside the room. Yes, do that, educators and teachers. Do that. Do that, do that, do that. I should say teachers because educators, they know what's up. But teachers, yes, come on now. Come on, get with the ball game. And while school and classroom budgets may be at tight in some of our schools, and even some small changes like sharing one book that reference a child's experience, this can make a difference. This was from a second and third grade teacher who she hangs posters inside her classroom and also outside of her classroom that reflects her students' identities and their experience, such as family and home life structures and language, and offers skin tone crayons so her students can see themselves in all aspects, yes, of her classroom. And her approach changes each school year depending on, the type of students that she has inside her classroom. And she says it's about who is this class? What do they bring? I'm growing my curriculum based on the community of children that I have each school year, which means learning about my students and their cultures are making and also making sure that they are represented. Give a hand claps on that. Yes, yes, yes. And finally, we are on our last one, which is teach our histories in other classes as well. Like I mentioned earlier, inside your math, your science, your English, your reading, your art, your PE, your sports, everywhere, you guys, everywhere. And it's not just the job of history teachers to take on the complex discussions around race and racism, including curriculum and sources that deal with both hard histories and narratives of resistance and agency is the job of every teacher, is the job of every teacher, is the job of every teacher inside of a school building. It is your job to teach and learn with your students as well. Talk with them about race, having those complex, uncomfortable conversations about racism with your students, all students, not just Black students, white students, Hispanics, all students, not just one particular, all students, educators, all students, teachers. Not just those in the history department, like I yes. Now, for example, in a STEM class, this is from a scientist, Ramona, who is the author of so many incredible books. She showcased little known inventors, particularly people of color and also women, and is critical to inform her students about the past. Now, in doing so, educators not only, they see themselves as scientists, advancements by revealing their messy historical realities, but it shows students how science is actually, conduct, and they have the opportunity to highlight, to spotlight scientists who have been written out of, of history in history books, and this invites more students into the world of science. I love that. Now, that was an example of a STEM class. So in an English class, make text from authors who represents a spectrum of racial, culture, and gender perspective available, and also emphasize the contribution of often marginalized people in American history. Um, like, for example, a different poem or Wonder or Ash. This is just, you guys to name a few, some of the books. And this teach students about the Africanism in American English when discussing or teaching grammar. And she also writes, she recalls her time reading, Mark Twain, Charles Dickens, and William Shakespeare in English class, but never about Langston Hughes, Maya Angelou, or Toni Morrison. And students should be introduced to texts, yes, by Black authors that speak about Black experience, Black perspectives, and Black accomplishments. Absolutely, absolutely. And these authors remind our children and adults that Black excellence is not only confined to athletics and entertainment. And how can we promote the academic excellence of Black children without introducing them to Black intelligence, individuals that they can see themselves someday becoming? So, That is something for all of you guys. Start addressing race and racism head on inside of your classroom as of today, which you should have been doing all along. But some of you guys are afraid, to have that talk inside your classroom because you don't want, you just shy away from it. You don't want to have that talk. And if you are having a talk, some of you guys, I'm not saying all of you, but some of you guys are pouring out false information to your students because you have not done your research. You do not know what you're talking about. So, like I keep saying over and over, or here, and then also on Future Educators Talk, because my co-hosts, they know this from me, like, if you guys want to have, I don't care who you are, if you're Black, Hispanic, Latino, Asian, I don't care who you are. If you want to have the talk with me about race and racism, the Black Lives Matter movement, whatever with me, that is fine. I am open to have a conversation with you. Trust me, I am. But if you do not know your facts, your information, if you have no knowledge of the type of conversation that you want to have with me, I need for you to do your homework first. Because I am going to have it the right way with you. I am not going to have it any other kind of way. Before you come with me to have a very uncomfortable conversation with me, you need to do your facts first. You need to do your homework. That is your job to do. It is not my job. It is not my job to teach you about this. That is not my job. It's not any of our job, Black people, to begin with. It's not our job to educate white people about this. It's not our job. That's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. I don't care if you guys come at me saying, oh, Damian, I don't care. But that is not, I'm going to say Damian for myself. And also Black people, it's all of us, Black people. It is not our job to educate white people on this. It's not our job. It never was, never will be. Okay? Just never. So let's see what else I want to talk with you guys about, because you know what? I'm gonna just leave that there. I'm gonna just leave that there, and we're gonna have another talk about this, where I am going to mainly, I'm probably going to bring on my co-host from my talk show, and also some more people, diverse people onto my show, so we can have this talk for you guys, for you all to get informed about this, because it's time. It's been time. So that is it. I'm going to wrap this up. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to this very important episode of Damian Talks Education. I hope you took something away from it. If not, just wait for a future episode of what I just mentioned. So thank you all so much. And like always, you guys, take care of yourself, be blessed, and enjoy your weekend. Peace out, DTE family.